Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Seraphin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name. Familiar with the name. Familiar with the name.
Let's bring in Kyle Seraphin. He's the FBI whistleblower who helped expose government censorship of our First Amendment rights.
Now, we only have this memo because a recently suspended FBI agent called Kyle Seraphin brought it to the public, and we're grateful that he did. Kyle, thank you so much for joining us tonight.
He's the host of something that strangely is called the Kyle Seraphin Show.
Kyle Seraphin, I can't thank you enough for speaking out. I knew you guys were out there, and I knew it was just a matter of time, but you got a lot of guts putting your face and your name to this. You're doing a service on behalf of the American people, and from the bottom of my cracked and broken heart sometimes, thank you very much.
Take a look behind the curtain with a real whistleblower and American patriot. Prepare to embrace the uncomfortable truth because this program has no time for comforting lies. Here is civil liberties enthusiast, Second Amendment defender, and recovering FBI agent Kyle Seraphin.
Well, hello, my friends. Welcome to the Kyle Seraphin Show for Thursday, September the 26th. Thank you for joining us. Today's kind of an important topic for me. I don't want to screw it up, so I got to just tell you right up front. It's very personal. Our friend of the Suspendables, many of you will consider him a friend as well, Marcus Allen, went and testified yesterday in front of the Weaponization Committee. This is a subcommittee underneath the House Judiciary Committee. And I think it's time that we just say it really clear and openly that they failed as a committee. But we did get some good sound bites out of it. Got a couple of nice, strongly worded letters. Our friend Marcus sent us a text as he was leaving D.C. yesterday, and he said, I'm leaving Mordor. The legal and the legislative end of this thing is over now. The kinetic time has begun. Some pretty stark warnings from that guy. And you guys can go and watch his opening statement, which is too long to play on the podcast. It's about 5 minutes, 4.5 minutes or so. It's on the social media feeds. It's on mine. It's on Garrett O'Boyle's. If you want to follow Garrett, it's at GOBActual. You guys should be doing that. You should be following that for an alternative take. You should be following my friend Real Steve Friend on Twitter, on X, which is at Real Steve Friend. While we're talking about follows, before we get too deep into the weeds, let's just say you guys can go find us over on Locals, where we talk about some of the stuff that's going on behind the scenes, both with this show, with the Suspendables, and so on. It's KyleSeraphin.com if you want to go sign up and promote. If you want to share some of the content over there, you can share a link to it. You certainly can. And people will get directed. They can either sign up as a subscriber or a free member, and we have a little bit of both on both. One of the things we're going to talk about a bit later is kit, because it was brought up during this hearing. Kit being the kind of things that we wear, body armor, first-line gear, like belts, holsters, equipment that you do to defend yourself, things that you can buy as an American citizen because we are not subjects in this country. And we have the ability to own a lot of equipment that is regulated and not allowed in other places. People are shocked. Oh, you can own body armor in the United States? Yeah, you can. And you should. And I do. So we'll talk a little bit about that. But a lot of the breakdowns are going to happen over on Locals because it's more appropriate for there. It's just not podcast material for what I do. But if you are interested in talking about kit and the stuff that you're going to see on the screen later on, let's do that. Let me give you kind of an overview of where we're going to go with today's show, because I think it's important. We're going to talk about COVID and why COVID was able to do what it did in America. I think we've had enough time away from it, and I don't think that it's going anywhere. That mindset should not leave us. We should be aware of it. It was referenced in the hearing yesterday. It's something that I found a little video on, a woman talking about the worldview that allowed it. And it was talked about on Fox News because we're still seeing the stuff that Steven Crowder and his investigative team did with this guy, Jay Varma, who was the COVID czar in New York City, which leads us to New York City as well. We're going to talk about New York City, the rotted apple. Eric Adams, who is the mayor of New York City, was discussed pretty heavily yesterday on our show with Sal Greco. And we discussed it, and then you found out something. Last night, he announced that he expects to be indicted by the feds. That the FBI has been doing an ongoing investigation since at least 2021. That's the part that people know about publicly. The odds are it actually has been going on maybe longer than that. The way these things work, we'll give you a little bit of insight because I've talked to people inside of the New York field office on how public corruption, that's the genre of case, how these public corruption cases work. So we're going to talk about all those things. And then we're going to talk about what yesterday's hearing and maybe the send-off words that Marcus Allen gave. I think they were salient. I think they were sober. I think they were emotional for him. If you listen to his testimony, you heard that his voice cracked quite a bit of it. He's a man of very high faith. Everything he has to say is a lot like Garrett's, but from the Catholic perspective. He encouraged people to praise the rosary and prepare themselves. Because nobody who is an analyst, and Marcus did it for 20 years with a security clearance for the United States Marine Corps, did it with the FBI. My buddy George Hill says the same thing. He had about 30 years in the intel community. These people they're not looking at this landscape and seeing a free, fair, and reasonable election that is going to result in an outcome that most of you are going to be comfortable with. And that's not to scare you. That's just to prepare you mentally. Anybody that's reading all the polling and all the things that says everything's going to go your way, it's just, once we get Donald Trump in, he's going to get rid of the IRS and he's going to do all these things. He's going to put rain on the drought lands and he's going to make the crops grow. It sounds to me like the President Camacho from Idiocracy. We got this guy and he's going to solve all our problems. When has that ever been the case outside of Jesus Christ? And if you remember, the way that Jesus Christ came to this earth was as a baby, a child, helpless, who could have been killed, who was sought after by worldly authorities, and then he won by surrendering and dying. So if you're a Christian, which is to say most of this country and probably a lot of this listening audience, and even if you're not, you understand that the Western ethos, which has been brought on by Christianity, has redefined the way that human victory works. Mostly it's done by power and strength. That's what we're going to see. These people in Congress, they have power, they have authority, they have money. They wield a certain amount of strength. And yet, that's not what we're really called to do in this country. And it's very hard for guys like me, for Garrett, for Steve, for people that took kinetic actions on behalf of those that were helpless and tried to go out there and do the thing that we signed up to be, which is people who did good and followed their oath and knew that you couldn't abuse your authority. It's very hard to look at a Christian perspective and see that surrender is how the ultimate victory gets done. And so I think a lot of us grapple with that. Some of you are warriors, have been to war, know what it's about. Some of you have done it domestically, and you fought evil in this country. And you sit there and you think, I was called to stand up for the weak, but I didn't do it because of pride or because of some sort of excitement for doing so. It's because I was called to do it because someone couldn't do it for themselves, and they should have a shot at a better life. And at the same time, how do you justify that with the turn the other cheek mentality? Where you, if someone takes something from you, you give them the other thing. It's probably the paradox of human existence. That they talked about it in a movie that what is it in? It's a Keanu Reeves movie, The Devil's Advocate, where the goof of all time, as described by the devil, played by Al Pacino, he says that basically God sets the rules one way and then sets man's intuition and instincts all in the opposite direction, and we're basically at odds with ourselves. It's true. But there is a message that says you have to deny yourself. You have to actually do work, that it's an uphill battle. Our country is dealing with that. I think we individually deal with it, but I think our country is dealing with it. So as I'm pitching all these things here, let me suggest that one of the reasons that I'm able to do this, the reason why I'm able to sit in this studio and talk to you, and the studio is simply an extra bedroom in a house that looks probably a lot like your house. I'm going to show you a house that doesn't look like your house later on today. My friends at Catholic Vote enable this. They're our single biggest sponsor. They make sure that this is possible, and they have a great email out there right now. You guys can get the Loop. I recommend it if you want some different news, and there is more. Let me just kind of hit the headlines, what they have from today's Loop, so you know what you're missing out on. CatholicVote.org, put in your email, and you'll get it. They're not going to sell you anything. That's just what they do. They just send you news that you care about. Trump campaign announces return to the shooting site. Donald Trump is going to be going to Butler on October the 5th. That's covered in here. The Senate exposes failures in the Secret Service in July. There's a Senate report. They cover that. 75% of the blue ribbon private schools in this country, there are only 40 private schools that are listed as blue ribbon national award winners from the Department of Education, which is garbage. But more than 3 out of the 4 of them are Catholic private schools. That's worth noting. I went to blue ribbon schools when I was a kid. I thought everybody went to that. I didn't know that was exceptional, and it is. Gallup Party showing IDs. That's bad news for Harris, apparently. Again, kind of be careful about when it comes to polling and what it means. Homeschool groups are getting banned in San Diego, on and on. Really good stuff. Like things that are interesting. When you read it, you're like, oh, I would click that. I would click on all those links, by the way. I think they're interesting. So we say thanks to them, and let's get into what we're going to talk about. And yes, if it sounds like I'm a little bit more subdued, I am subdued because I think this is such a heavy topic. So let's start with COVID. I think that's the right way to go. Let me do it with some humor first. Let's lighten it up. Here's some consequences As we said, it's a New York City thing, right? It's Jay Varma, but it's bigger than that. It's that hypocrites and tyrants were the ones that ran COVID policy. And those people mostly have not been removed. Most of those people are still in positions of authority, or they still have positions where they're going to be able to weigh in. Certainly in the federal government. The state governments and the local governments, hopefully there's some overturn. But you need to be aware of what they asked you to do, because I think, like a classic bully, all of these COVID policies were shoved down our throats because they saw weakness. They smelled it, and Americans proved them correct. That's the reason why I'm sitting in this chair in many ways, is that I didn't do that. And many of you are listening to this because you have that same instinct. That instinct is to say, how dare you? And no. And your move. Because that's really what it needs to be. It's that you've drawn a line in the sand, that you have accepted, that you have certain principles that you will not fudge on. That's what the entire Suspendables brand is. It may be a joke, and it started as a joke, but it's deadly serious at this point because of guys like Jay Varma. Guys who were out having sex orgies on ecstasy in basements of Wall Street banks. What is more symbolic of disconnected power than that? Guys were having these experiences and then coming and telling you that your job is not essential and you can't go to work and you can't earn a living and you cannot open your business and you can't serve customers at your restaurant. And you have to depend on the federal government, which is absurd because the federal government doesn't generate revenue. It simply collects it and redistributes it at an inefficient rate. So these people were out there telling you something that was fundamentally false. And there's a little bit of this comeuppance that's coming in. We kind of gloat about this guy. I guess he just lost his pharma job, so I'm going to let Greg Gutfield talk about it. But it is truly wild that that happened, and it only happened 3 years ago in the rear view. And we all had to deal with it, didn't we? And it's all going to come back around again, whether it happens in the next few months or it's going to happen in the next couple of years. Do not think that these people have just given up and gone home. What they saw was a vulnerability and a weakness in the majority of the population, even if you are not one of those people, even if you sit in the minority with me. All right, Greg Gutfield, a little bit more lighthearted.
COVID czar fired over orgies. Jillian, this story makes my head explode. Former NYC COVID czar, Dr. Jay Varma, fired from his current role as VP of a pharmaceutical firm after he revealed on hidden camera that he attended drug-fueled sex parties during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic when he was a senior health advisor to Mayor de Blasio and told New Yorkers they had to stay home and keep the city shut down. Meanwhile, he's banging like a crazed Wolverine.
First of all, what's going on with all the sex parties, by the way?
I know.
Like Diddy and this guy. And by the way, I actually knew Diddy. We invested in a water company together. I was never invited to one of the parties.
That's the real crime.
Right? I'm like, is it me or is it? Truthfully, so much of what went on, and now that I know I can swear, during COVID was bullshit. We all smelled right through it, and the harder they clamped down, the more full of it they were.
Right. The harder they clamped down, the more full of it they were, and it was BS. But it still happened, and most Americans rolled over. Steve Friend was on the show the other day, and you guys remember he was talking about what? It gave all of the worst people the ability to feed that instinct to report and snitch and to exercise petty tyrant authorities that they always wish they could have. All the people that really shouldn't have had it did. So we're not done with it. And I saw this video and it actually summed it up. One of the things that I talk about on this program all the time, if you guys are a regular listener, then you are familiar with this. This is not going to be news. I think there's a thing, an imbalance right now in our current world between masculine and feminine. And I don't mean men and women in this case. I mean the masculine ethos and the feminine ethos. The feminine is necessary. The masculine is necessary. And even though I ascribe to one over the other, it's not that I don't appreciate femininity. Of course I do. I have 3 daughters and a wife. Most of the people that live in my house that I support are women. But there is something uniquely feminine about caring, about concern, about trying to make sure that everybody has an equal footing. My wife has these instincts all the time. We temper each other. I have a very hard-nosed instinct. I would do much more aggressive discipline with my children. It's important. I'm tempered by my wife's caring and compassion. But also, when the other side, when that compassion and caring gets out of control, we have fatal altruism, a suicidal instinct to give and to the point where we can no longer survive. And I think that's what COVID was about. This woman hits 50%, maybe 75% of what I think the issue was. So I want to play this clip so that we remember it. It's not to say that we don't need a feminine worldview in the world. It means that it needs to be tempered and balanced. All things in moderation. This lady kind of nails us home. There's a second piece of it that I'm going to add at the end of it, though, because I do think that she misses one thing.
What COVID was the very embodiment of the female worldview, which is unable to balance risks and benefits. It is unable to think soundly about economic matters. It believed that you could substitute a government check for private enterprise, that the government had the capacity to make judgments about what's an essential business and what's not an essential business. Ask a worker, is your business essential? Yes, it's essential. Ask a consumer. And a belief that we were not adequately comparing the risk of COVID to heart disease and cancer. COVID deaths did not even come close to those deaths, which we take for granted. So I just felt like, right, in March, we already knew everything that needed to be known about COVID. We had the mortality data from Italy.
Yes.
They found that the average age of decedents was 80 with 3 comorbidities. Nothing changed. And yet we pretended that this was a disease that put young people at risk.
American Freedom Alliance is where that came from, some sort of a panel. I don't know the lady's name. If you guys do, you can put it in the chat. You can put it in the comments. I give her credit for what she said. I think that's correct. I think the second half of it, though, is also important. We have done multiple programs here, multiple podcasts, talking about what is accurately called gerontocracy, but what I like to call the geriocracy. The old people. Now, many of the people that are in our listening audience, especially the people that have time to be in our chat, some of you are retired, some of you are close to it. I'm not attacking you for age. That's silly. I respect people for their age, their wisdom, their experience, and so on. But it's foolish to say that when you get older, you do not reassess risks differently. I know that. I'm 42. I'm not older, but I'm older than I was. And I look at things like jumping off of monkey bars differently than I would have if I was 25 or 32. I used to do a thing called a dynamic PLF. You guys know what that is? That's when it's called the parachute landing fall. They teach it to you at airborne school. The dynamic PLF is getting up on top of a 9-foot boundary and jumping down into hard ground with kit on usually, and being able to roll out of it without injuring yourself. That sounds like a really, really good way for me to end up coming up lame and having to be sitting in this chair and have someone crutch me in to do this podcast at this point. I look at risks differently at 40, at 42. Than I did when I was 35 or 32 or 25. And when I was 19, I was basically invincible. I actually separated my shoulder. I might have actually broken my collarbone and I walked it off with no anything. And I still have like a deformity in my collarbone because of it. My clavicle has a prominent bump on one side that I actually think came from breaking it on a mountain bike. So if you guys know that experience, we know that people, as they get older, they look at risks differently. Think about the things that they tell you as a senior citizen that you should avoid. Rugs. You should avoid rugs. Joe Biden almost died coming out of the shower because his dog stepped on a rug and then ran away and he fell over the rug. The stairs are a threat. A sandbag, the wind. You can get injured as you get older and older. And what I think we just heard was that 80-year-olds was the sort of median age of death with 3 comorbidities. And it was usually like hypertension, diabetes, and whatever else, heart disease. The classic things, high blood pressure, things that come from a bad or sedentary lifestyle. That's who died during the COVID crisis. And yeah, were there some exceptions, of course. People who had genetic anomalies and things we don't know about. But it is worth noting that as you age, death becomes more and more of a real companion that walks alongside you at any time. And as a paramedic, I've seen it in the field. I dealt with it all the time. There were people who were in their 50s that were very old, body-wise. They had a lot of miles on the chassis, right? And you've all seen those people. I saw people who were in their 70s that looked awesome. And they were helping while someone who was in their 60s was dying because that person in their 60s lived differently. And you assess risk differently. And we did that during COVID as a nation because we have very old people in office. We have people that are over the age of 80. We have people over the age of 90, and it is in both parties. And that is an enemy. You lose the boldness and the ability to have a certain amount of skin in the game. You literally have less skin at that age because the collagen production shuts down. Think about it. I see it in my own father, who I love dearly, and I see his hands, and sometimes he'll have blood running out of his hands because he still works like a fiend. But your body doesn't heal the same way, just the way that I've got scars and cuts on my hands at all times now, and I never used to have that stuff. And my kids, they can cut themselves, and 10 minutes later I look and it's gone. So they assessed risk differently, and we let people who were older and we let people with a feminine worldview dictate policy. And that is a lot of what's going on right now at the FBI as well, because we keep promoting women and people who think that government is a solution in and of itself. Government is meant to be a means to an end. So that's what this hearing looks like. And we're seeing a failure of leftist policies because even if you call out, hey, this thing that you guys came up with, this nasty compassion, it doesn't work. It's ineffective. And yet you're going to try it. And if you step out of line, like I suppose Eric Adams did, I don't know why he became politically inconvenient, but it seems like he did, then you get removed too. Because this is a real dangerous time to be a dissident, even if you're in the party of the people that are in charge. And I have no sympathies for Eric Adams, none whatsoever. He seems like a detestable character who's all based on pomp and circumstance and has very little substance underneath. And there's a lot of people whose lives he ruined. So screw him. But be aware of him. How about this? Let's be aware of this too. This one's coming in from ABC. I like going there sometimes. The Biden administration is pledging a new glide bomb package to Ukraine just ahead of Zelensky coming to the White House. You know how a foreign president from a country that's at war, apparently for its very existence, who's been milking the U.S. teat for billions of dollars, over $100 billion, they're going to get another $2 billion in additional military aid. It seems strange because that means that there's going to have to be some planes that go along with it as well, which means that we have to put people there to teach them how to be pilots and all the other things. We are awfully involved in this conflict. And then we let this guy come around and he was picked up by a military jet from what we can see. That seems like a real problem. And then he was allowed to fly around the United States and basically do campaign stops on behalf of the Biden-Harris administration, which is to say Harris's reelection campaign as vice president to president. Let's call it the reelection campaign because that's what she's trying to do. She's trying to be reelected into the same thing that she's doing. And she's running against her own campaign with Joe Biden. How interesting. He came here and did his thing, the quid pro quo. This is what it looks like, quid pro quo. I do something and you do something for something. You come and campaign on behalf of me to all of our sympathetic Ukrainian-based people, which I don't know why they are, but they are. That's how they're programmed. And we'll give you $2 billion in glide bombs and packages. And by the way, of course, we're going to help you with the pilots and the planes to be able to drop it. Why not? The Biden administration announced another $375 million in additional assistance for the first time. It will include America's Joint Standoff Weapons, the JSOW, which is a glide bomb, something they can send from a long distance out, has retractable wings, reaches targets up to 70 miles away. There are several versions of the JSOW, but the ones that are being sent are also going to be equipped with cluster munitions, which is a borderline war crime. And people have claimed that as much. It also is going to announce another $2 billion in Ukrainian aid under the Ukraine Security Assistance Initiative. We don't hate our members of Congress enough. Why is it that they are doing that while our dollar continues to be valued at a lower and lower rate? It's higher and higher inflation, grocery prices. We're bringing people in. Like America has just basically opened itself up to that feminine instinct, the suicidal altruism that you are going to give to the point where you look around and you have nothing to eat yourself. We haven't taken care of our veterans. We haven't taken care of the homeless that live here, whether you like them or not, whether they're drug addicts or not. We don't need to be importing people that are not American. I actually listened to a really good sermon just outside of Washington, D.C. And I think it must have been in 2020. And it turns out that the priest who gave that sermon was also named the national chaplain for my friends at Catholic Vote. His name is Father DeSalis, and he talked about a bullseye, the concept of looking at a bullseye of where you can and cannot help. Your first responsibilities are for yourself. You have to make sure that you're upright and standing and capable and able to go on, because if you can't take care of yourself, you can't help anyone else. This is basic stuff, basic human survival. Our instincts are built that way. The second thing is your family. That's the next circle. And those are all the people that you are directly tied to and blood related to and live under your household, and you're responsible for them too. So you got to make sure that they have good outcomes. And then you can look to your neighbors in your neighborhood. And most of us will never get farther than that circle. We don't have the means. We don't have the time. We don't have the wherewithal to be able to do more than the people that are just in our little circle, whether it be a virtual community or a real community. And if you can do more than that, you help out your township, your city, and you work there. And if you can do more than that, maybe you can do your state. But none of us have the ability to fix the whole world, and certainly not even our whole country. So how on earth are we going to do that? Now, the hope is that all these little overlapping bullseyes are people who are living the right way, and they overlap to the point where we cover all the needs, and we also are able to help some of our neighbors' needs. And hopefully they can help themselves a little bit too. But opening up our border is a bleed over of that. It skips over the bullseyes of capabilities. And we're doing that as a nation, and we're throwing our money into Ukraine. And you guys know this. But I want you to know where it comes from, because it's the same reason why COVID was able to overrun this country's sensibilities and why all the Karens popped up that were upset with us. New York is a great example. There's too many people living there. For those of you that live there, my condolences, my sympathies. Here's a picture of the rotten apple. Welcome to New York. The Statue of Liberty is laid out. The fruit is rotted at the core. We talked about it yesterday with Sal Greco. Here's the story of Eric Adams. Let's actually read his take on it. Let's listen to his take on it, because it's important. I'm going to give him a little bit of time to answer in his own words. I don't believe almost anything he says. He's a politician, and like I said, he seems to be one of minimal substance. But Eric Adams, indicted after federal corruption investigation, is the headline from the New York Times. We'll cover that in 1 second. I'll give Eric Adams a chance to do his little presser. He released this last night.
My fellow New Yorkers, it is now my belief that the federal government intends to charge me with crimes. If so, these charges will be entirely false, based on lies. But they would not be surprising. I always knew that if I stood my ground for all of you, that I would be a target. And a target I became. For months, leaks and rumors have been aimed at me in an attempt to undermine my credibility and paint me as guilty. Just this past week, they searched the home of our new police commissioner, looking for documents from 20 years ago, just 1 week after he joined my administration. Enough. I will fight these injustices with every ounce of my strength and my spirit. If I'm charged, I know I am innocent. I will request an immediate trials so the New Yorkers can hear the truth.
It goes on. We'll see. I mean that seriously. Let him request a speedy trial and see where that goes. Or let him hope that he can just play it off as long as possible, which sounds probably more likely. Let's read a little bit of the article here. Eric Adams, he was a retired police captain. He was elected as the city's 110th mayor nearly 3 years ago on the promise to rein in crime, which he has failed to do. He's been indicted on a federal corruption investigation, said people with knowledge of the matter. This is the New York Times. You know that DOJ is more than happy to go to them and give them intel. So it's probably pretty solid here. It probably is decent. The indictment is under seal, so we don't actually know what he's being charged with, whether they are charges or a charge singular, unclear. But the belief is that the federal investigation focused on his conspiracy with the Turkish government to receive illegal foreign donations. If you listen to yesterday's show, there is a lot of smoke there. And as you blow it away, some of it has to do with foreign money coming into New York City. There's a couple of the things that I'll highlight here that are listed as possible pieces of it. What you also know is that he just put an FBI guy in as the interim police chief, or interim police commissioner, rather. Somebody who wrote a letter asking for leniency for Charles McDonnell, the guy who used to be in charge of the counterintelligence branch of the New York field office at the FBI, a guy who took money from Albanian intelligence officers to the tune of like $200,000+ that we know of, but his girlfriend, who's been on this show, or former girlfriend, said it was in the tune of millions. We're seeing that AOC and others like her have called for his resignation. That's interesting. AOC did it before the announcement of the indictment. You think she wasn't read in on the policies? He's become inconvenient. I think he's inconvenient to their regime. There's some other videos of him talking about it, but he basically said New York is fed up and that this immigration thing that they're doing down at the southern border and busing in migrants and illegals, by the way, far less than would have hit El Paso and McAllen and, Laredo, Texas, Brownsville. Those places have been completely overrun by illegals running across the border. New York City got like way less than that. and was unable to survive. Because financially, it is devastating to bring people in that you can't take care of. That suicidal altruism, that feminine instinct to bring in as much as you can to the point where you are no longer feeding your own family, taking care of your own bullseye. When the indictment is public, Mr. Adams, who's obviously a Democrat, he will become the first city mayor in New York City in 110 mayors to face federal charges while in office. Nobody knows when he's going to surrender. None of that stuff's really particularly interesting to me. What is interesting is that he said he stood his ground for New Yorkers, which he basically held both grounds. You listen to Sal Greco say he talks out of both sides of his mouth. That seems to be pretty clear. That's what he does. He says one thing, but he said things that were made him inconvenient, I believe, that made for bad sound bites for the Biden administration, which is why you see people like AOC, who are probably read in, making that claim, hey, it's time to step down. It is an extraordinary turnabout. The guy's pretty good for 64 years old. But again, another person, not that young. Do you really want your city run by someone 64? He's a former state senator, so he left the police department, got a retirement out of that, because as a captain, you're a senior guy. Then he went on, became a state senator. Then he became the Brooklyn borough president. It's kind of like the mayor of one of the boroughs. The boroughs, all the 5 boroughs, have their own sort of president, and that's a political position of note. We have a family acquaintance that's in that spot for Queens, or has been. So the belief is that this began in 2021. This is what the New York Times is quoting. Possible foreign donations, whether he was pressuring fire department officials to sign off on the opening of a new high-rise consulate building for the Turkish government. And then what was the kickback? He was getting these lavish flights. He was getting pricey upgrades. He was being taken and flown to Turkey. There was some information about a Brooklyn construction company that was being run by Turkish Americans. A university in D.C., Turkish ties. A lot of this stuff sounds like foreign government involvement, hence the CI thing. Hence, it's very interesting that there was an attempt for leniency from someone in his administration that he just named in the McGonigal thing. The question is, did Charlie McGonigal participate in a high-level New York corruption scheme? And I'm asking this question because I don't know the answer. But when you start seeing a lot of these coincidences, is it possible that he basically went in there and he got a pretty light sentence for what he did, which should have been considered treasonous? He should have gotten the same kind of thing that Robert Hansen did. He was the top CI. He was the top counterintelligence person in the New York field office, which made him one of the top maybe 5 people for counterintelligence for the entire country when it comes to the actual mission set, because he worked for the FBI's New York field office. So the question then becomes, what happened in that sort of plea agreement? Because Charlie McGonigal got kind of a decent deal. He didn't have to give up that much money. He's got a couple of years. He's trying to get inpatient treatment for alcoholism during it. It seemed pretty fair. And they claim that he gave some extraordinary information to help other investigations. It means he gave up somebody. That's from the DOJ's actual pressers there. So now you got this man in the crosshairs. And what's interesting is seeing, you saw the video is actually tagged with a watermark from Leroy. He's at Viral News New York. That's his handle. And the claim he's shared with me in DMs, and you're seeing some other people out there saying this, is that now the even more rabid political leftists will get out there. People that have no moderation. I don't think that Eric Adams could be described as a moderate in any way. But it's going to even get potentially more left-leaning, which is wild. And they also mentioned in this article, which I thought was pretty fair, Eric Adams, his department has investigated him 4 times. There were associations with criminals, including Mike Tyson's, which was brought up yesterday on the program, who's convicted of rape. Adams said he did nothing wrong. That's the reason Sal Greco lost his thing. You see the pattern here? You get accused of the thing that somebody else did. You start realizing that you're over the target. And the only major issue that they had with Sal Greco was that he's friends with a guy named Roger Stone. Roger Stone, who seems like a pretty nice guy. I don't agree with everything Roger Stone has, but I don't have to. He's not a politician. He's a guy that's in like the influence world. So be it. He's been working around political campaigns since long before I was born. Another one of those people, not young. One of you in the chat said, when I'm 64, that maybe I'll feel differently about it. I might feel differently about how I feel about being 64, but let me tell you this. I acknowledge that even at 42, I have less going on. I know the limitations that I have based on being much fitter and faster and younger and more aggressive. And at 64, I imagine I'll be even less aggressive about certain things. I'll know what the capabilities are, and I'll have less skin in the game. My kids will be out there. I'll want my kids to take the reins. What we keep seeing is these people hold on to power into their 80s. It's a dangerous instinct to hold on to worldly power when you should be handing it off and moving into the advisory realm. I like to think of this as sort of like the way that tribal systems, where you had tribal elders, people who knew things, but they didn't have to execute the policy. The elders of the council And the chief is the one who has to execute. The chief got to be young. The chief can't be in his 80s. He can't be in his 60s. So it's very interesting to see someone who's 64 as the mayor. I get it. He's already had another career, and we don't want politicians to do it as career. It's a fine balance, but at some point in time, there is a set of power years, and at some point you get out of those power years, and you shouldn't be running things. In any case, Eric Adams, he's in hot water. It's going to be rough. He made a lot of stink about being a black man in charge of the city. That was a big deal. That was a big change from de Blasio, whose big claim to fame was that he had a black child that he adopted. So a lot of this permeation of race continues on. And it actually entered into the hearings yesterday, that hearing in front of Weaponization. So I'm going to play you a little bit of that. Stacey Plaskett, who is a so-called representative. She is actually a non-voting member of Congress. She represents the U.S. Virgin Islands. She's pretty useless as a person. She also rides a bicycle around. The guys almost like ran into her on a bicycle. Guys being Garrett O'Boyle and Steve Friend, my fellow FBI whistleblowers that I talk with daily. Many of you just listened to the American Radicals podcast and came out of there. Those guys went and spoke on the Hill in May of last year. So we're now a year and change away from that. Stacey Plaskett is going to explain to you exactly why the Weaponization Committee exists in her mind. And she also slips what she thinks, and she's a useful talking face for the party. Look, she can't even vote in Congress, and she's the quote-unquote ranking member. She's the senior person assigned by Democrats in this farcical Weaponization Committee, and it is a farce. I'm going to tell you what she thinks about the DOJ in a second. I'm going to actually let her do it in her own words. Before we do that, as we enter into some really, really dark times, and I think we are getting there, Marcus Allen's going to tell you a little bit about that in a second. Let me run through a sponsor here that's relevant to this moment. Folks, you probably know this, but your life can be taken away in an instant. Your freedom can be taken away in an instant. And if you want to prepare against it, you should probably do something to get ready now. Prepare or repair is the motto. 4-week emergency food kits from My Patriot Supply is something that we have. I'll show you guys pictures of them later. It's got everything you need in a crisis, over 2,000 calories per day. It's enough to go around in times of social unrest and government crackdowns, God forbid, attack on the homelands, or a government that comes after you. It lasts for up to 25 years so that when disaster strikes, you are ready. We've seen this panic in our lifetimes. We just talked about COVID. It's not that long ago. You shouldn't be taking your family's safety for granted. I don't. Right now, you can save $50 on the 4-week emergency food kit that we keep in the home. It is the one that we have in our closet. Go to preparelikekyle.com, the website preparelikekyle.com. Save $50 on the 4-week emergency food kit from My Patriot Supply. They'll send it over quickly. The shipping is free. That's a big deal for me as well. Again, preparelikekyle.com. Get your 4-week emergency food kit. It is the one that's featured on there right now. Everybody, you can always, kind of assess whether or not you're able to do a one month, whether you could do a 3-month. Check it out, figure it out. Marcus Allen's going to recommend more than that to you, and I'm going to let him play it too. Let's start with how this opening statement happened from the ranking member of the Democrat Party. The point of this weaponization committee was to make you okay with the idea of getting rid of the DOJ and the FBI. Thank God. That's what she says. I'm behind that 100%. So I avow that statement. The second piece of it is she thinks it's to protect America from white fragility and Christian nationalism. The Democrats will say what they mean sometimes. They will tell you that Eric Adams has to go because a mouthpiece comes out and does it. And it seems like they always find some female minority type to do it, whether it be an AOC, and she's kind of a fake minority, or Stacey Plaskett, who's also kind of fake because she had a very posh upbringing. She lives in the Virgin Islands. But listen to this. Listen to Plaskett in her own words.
What is the point of this subcommittee? Because it's necessary for the public and the media to hear, to try, and provide cover for the eradication of the Department of Justice and the FBI. We are having these hearings so that you become immune. You become inured to the notion of the removal of the FBI and DOJ, so that those agencies are no longer there to serve as a check against white nationalism, great replacement theorists, Christian nationalists, white fragility, fascists, and the twice impeached, convicted felon, former president and would-be dictator, Donald Trump.
And that is what it's all about. They have to protect us. The DOJ and the FBI must protect us from Donald Trump and white fragility and Christian nationalism and all the other BS she just said. And here is a picture on the screen that you can see. For those of you that are watching, and those of you who are listening, I'll read some titles. They're there. Things Fall Apart. The New Jim Crow. Castle. How We Fight for Our Lives, and White Fragility. These are all books that were on the shelf for the employee library in the Kansas City field office. These were available for people to check out and learn about all the problems that the FBI is going to fix because everybody is racist. And the DOJ is the solution to it. And she said the quiet part out loud. The important part of the DOJ is to protect America from a Donald Trump presidency. I just said pregnancy because I'm thinking about abortion issues too. Man, isn't that something? Isn't that something to say? Well, the reason why they actually had that hearing, which Glenn Kirshner actually backed up a Suspendable's point, although he did it about abortion because he's a piece of garbage. Glenn Kirshner, let me just tell you who was asked to testify. They had 4 witnesses. You'll notice I wasn't there. You'll notice Garrett O'Boyle wasn't there. You notice Steve Friend wasn't there. There are other whistleblowers who are pretty private, and they were not there. They let Marcus Allen go there. I thought he did a good job. Marcus is a different kind of fighter. He's a much more subdued human being. He's not nearly as aggressive or mean as me or Steve or even Garrett. But Glenn Kirshner was one of the people they brought in. He's an MSNBC legal analyst. He's a big Democrat donor. He gave $5,000 to Joe Biden this year. How do I know that? Because I looked him up. And this is going to come in just a moment. That's the Biden Victory Fund. It's in April. He gave $5,000. That's the individual max. I blocked out his address so you guys can't see it. Glenn Kirshner. He lives in Leesburg, Virginia. What they're talking about in this clip that I'm going to play you shortly is exposing where people live, like the towns they live in. Are you serious? This is on your voter's registration. It's not. People think they have this right to like anonymity. No, you don't. You have a right to privacy, but not anonymity. Not in the world, especially when you do stupid things like give money to politicians where they actually ask you for your address because they have to do that. Let me just put this out there. They had a MSNBC legal analyst who spent 30 years at the DOJ who made some really eye-popping statements, particularly trying to defame me, which is always fun to know that I'm in this stuff. He made these eye-popping statements, and what did he say? He said that he got witnesses killed in Washington, D.C. No further information, by the way. No follow-up questions asked. I'm really curious about that. But he did say one thing correctly. He said that you're not allowed to follow unlawful orders. I'm going to play you that clip in a second. But he was talking about abortion and Project 2025. Because what this hearing did, it was supposed to talk about FBI whistleblowers and their mistreatment, which they didn't have more than one FBI whistleblower there. They had Tristan Levitt, who comes from Empower Oversight. So they had a lawyer who used to work in the government, who seems pretty soft on these things. Tristan, if you listen, I think your stuff here is always soft. I think you guys peddle a political line when they need to be hit in the face with facts and hardballs. They also had Michael Horowitz, who I think is, what did George Hill said the other day, which was useful. He said Michael Horowitz, who's the Inspector General for the DOJ, is about as useful as a tit on a bull. And I think that's correct too. Absolutely useless so far. Very, very cautious. Another old person that doesn't have any ability to be bold and daring and seems to protect the regime. So they had an MSNBC legal analyst. They had an attorney who's representing whistleblowers, but actually is kind of like a politician type because a lot of their business involves getting donors, sounding like they're doing something, but not inviting Garrett O'Boyle to stuff. And then they had Horowitz, and then they had an actual FBI whistleblower in Marcus Allen. And thank God Marcus Allen did the thing that he's did. Let's start with unlawful orders. The reason why the Suspendables did what they did is that you cannot follow unlawful orders, including when they are discriminated towards yourself. That's the basis of a lawsuit that I have in the Southern District of Texas, folks. We're suing the FBI because they told me to do something and I said it was discriminatory towards me. You can't allow bad treatment of yourself. That's the first bullseye. The first bullseye says you do not allow bad treatment of yourself either, not by your government. They're supposed to serve you. And when they tell you to do something illegal, immoral, or unethical, you don't do it. Kirshner actually knows that, even though he's a leftist hack.
It is, and what I'm reminded of, Representative, is after I graduated law school and I was sent to Army Law School, the JAG school on the campus of the University of Virginia, one thing that was drilled into our heads is you must obey lawful orders, but equally important, I would say more important, you must disobey unlawful orders.
Yeah, you must disobey unlawful orders. That's true, Glenn. That's true. Justice Matters is his handle. That's what he goes after. And then he's like a guy who likes to pose for pictures with Robert De Niro because justice is so important to him. MSNBC, NBC News, legal analyst. Business must be good. He was a 30-year Fed prosecutor. He worked the homicide division in Washington, D.C. out of the United States Attorney for the District of Columbia, which is kind of a funny little name for things. He would have worked under like Matthew Graves if he was still there today. And DC is one of the weirdest little animals in the federal system because it actually does local crimes. Because DC is a federal district, it's the only place. I was explaining this to my friend Alpha Luna the other day. As a local cop, you're used to going to a DA. The feds, they go to a United States attorney or the assistant United States attorney in reality. But Washington, D.C. has two branches. One of them prosecutes local crime under the U.S. Attorney's Office, and then the other one does federal crime, and you could do it either way. By the way, this is the major issue with January 6th. They should have all been prosecuted as local trespassing and riot charges, not the federal stuff that they did. They went after him with the big hammer. So there's Superior Court, that's the local version of it. Then there's federal court. They went after the federal, that's the district courts. In any case, Glenn was working there for a long time. And then he made money by being a legal analyst for MSNBC, but let it be known that he worked in the federal government for quite a while. So I got a couple of these videos here. Let me talk about what should have been the topics being discussed. Here's Matt Gaetz talking to Marcus about the way he was treated. We're going to cover this for a little longer. We may go over the hour because I don't care. This stuff is really important to me. Here's Matt Gaetz.
But to the matter at hand, Mr. Allen, it's good to see you again. You came last year and you told us about these terrible things the Department of Justice was doing to you. And you've testified today, you still don't think the Department of Justice has treated whistleblowers like yourself and others fairly. Is that your testimony?
That's correct. The treatment is unfair.
Do you agree with that assessment, Mr. Horowitz?
As I said in my testimony, Congressman, I think putting someone like Mr. Allen on unpaid leave for 2+ years is unfair while you're trying to adjudicate.
Yeah, no, I get that.
There needs to be a process here that happens promptly.
The process was to punish these people and to make an example of them. That's obvious to everyone. They saw improper actions at the FBI and DOJ. They blew the whistle on it, and then the process was the punishment, and it was the point. I think that's how Mr. Allen feels. Is it?
Correct. The process in this instance definitely felt like the punishment.
Yeah, so they've done it to you. They've done it to others. Mr. Horowitz says it shouldn't have been done. And so now I want to be a little reflective about this with Congress. Mr. Allen, you've seen since you have given us this testimony, us continue to pass continuing resolutions that put no consequence on the DOJ or the FBI for what they've done to you and your colleagues. Do you think Congress has appropriately protected whistleblowers?
I do not, Congressman, and I think the policy recommendations can be put forward that there can be bipartisan support for to protect whistleblowers going forward in the future.
Absolutely. I mean this in no way as a partisan critique. Matter of fact,
It goes on. And then he suggests that maybe they don't pay Chris Wray, that they defund his salary. I recommended to Matt Gaetz yesterday via social media, but feel free to go and boost that signal if you guys want. I recommended that they defund his jet because Chris Wray doesn't care about his paycheck, not in the way that most of us do. He was making $9 million more a year, and now he makes like $250,000. He made like $9.2 million the year before he came into the FBI. Chris Wray has money. His wife also apparently is wealthy. Apparently Chris Wray is the working part of that family and has been a multimillionaire in what he did prior to the FBI. What does he love? A $60 million jet at his beck and call. A security detail 24/7. Get rid of Chris Wray's security detail. Defund that. Take money away specifically and pull his access to the plane. Change the federal law saying that he cannot fly on a private jet and put him on commercial. Senators fly coach all the time, as do congressional representatives. You'll jump on planes sometimes and find them. They ride back with us. Chris Wray rides on a $60 million jet with an armed SWAT team everywhere he goes. Screw that. Like, you wouldn't even notice Chris Wray if you went into your grocery store because you don't know Chris Wray, except when he has like 6 SWAT guys rolling around with him in suits. Then you would, because he has a security detail. And that's what it's all about. It's about feeling like a big shot. So that's part one. They didn't treat Marcus Allen fairly. And I'm going to give you some evidence of it. The late and now burning in hell Sheila Jackson Lee had these lies to say about my friends. She's a big part of our intro, isn't she? She kicks it off. I'm going to play that clip for you. The actual clip, if you guys haven't heard the whole thing. It's real. It's from just after the last hearing when Democrats decided to go out and bring Chris Wray out and slander me and my friends, which is what they did in this hearing as well. They didn't care about hearing the truth about fixing something, which should be a bipartisan issue, by the way. Do they think that that Democrats will hold power forever? They're certainly acting like it. Another reason, another sort of notch towards no expectation of normalcy in November.
Are you familiar with former FBI agents Garrett O'Boyle and Marcus Allen?
Again, I'm familiar with the names.
Thank you. O'Boyle was suspended for accessing information about an ongoing case and then leaking to the press, and Allen was suspended for interfering in the investigation of a January 6th suspect. Both Allen and O'Boyle testified before the Weaponization Committee in May. Were you aware of that?
Yes, ma'am.
I think they are clearly there for all friends and family to see. I assume they wanted to be seen. Do you know who Kash Patel is, if you know?
Yes, I know who he is.
He's an aide to President Trump, isn't he? Or was an aide? Or is an aide to President Trump?
Well, he was an individual who served in a number of different roles, both up here on the Hill and in the executive branch.
Thank you. Here's another picture. It's the checks that Serapin sent to both O'Boyle and Allen. Each check was for $255,194. Let me say that again. These men were paid $255,194 after they testified as so-called whistleblowers. And it should be noted that it says here, as it says, for holding the line.
Burn in hell, lady. Good riddance. And I expect that some of your colleagues will join you soon. They weren't paid anything. By the way, I did get a good chunk of that money to Marcus Allen. We've been trying to avoid the possibility of the IRS hitting us with a gift tax because the money stayed with me for so long. The reason they couldn't accept the money that we raised, and many of you were part of that, and I very much appreciate you donating to help my friends out. And they appreciate it too. Let me be fully transparent about what happened with that money. I held on to it. And I kept waiting for them to accept it. And I kept pushing them. Hey, just take the money. Who cares? Their attorneys advised them, no, we need to resolve these things with the FBI. And we don't want to give them another arrow to try to sink into our hearts saying, well, they accepted money and therefore they're in violation of FBI policies and therefore they can't be reinstated. So neither of them accepted money. Marcus was reinstated, given a security clearance. He resigned. I wrote him checks the same day. He got them and cashed them. So he's received $180,000 of that through all of his family members. They all got the single joint gift amount limit under the IRS rules because we held on to it for so long. So I wrote $36,000 checks out times 5. Those all went out to his family. Like I said, I'm telling you because you are the ones who donated it. And then what do? We hold on to the rest of it. It's invested. It'll come back out and then it'll go to Marcus on January 1st. Again, across his family members. They'll all get it. So I did send those checks and they ripped them up because they couldn't receive them. Garrett's money is invested as well. It's earning interest through a private little access we have. What they had to do, so you guys understand, they had to write letters saying that I'm no longer going to hold any claim on this so that Seraphin can invest it. So that's what we did. So I took possession of it and I will give it to them because I would never take somebody's money because this has never been about money and I don't care about it. I'd rather go hungry than take something that's not mine. So it's being taken care of. Let me tell you what this lady said because there's more of it. If you guys never saw this original hearing, this is July that she did this, but it's in response to what happened in May of 2023. So this is now over a year old. Here's this useless, this horrific human being, Sheila Jackson Lee, who failed at running for mayor. She's just saying whatever feels good. The truth is not relevant to them, as you're going to find out Jerry Connolly did yesterday. Another hearing, another opportunity to slander me and the Suspendables.
Diverse. Let me start with our whistleblower journey here. Are you familiar with FBI Special Agents Kyle Serapin?
I'm familiar with the name.
Is that yes?
I'm familiar with the name.
Yeah. The committee heard testimony that Mr. Serapin was suspended after he mishandled his service weapon and then said he wanted to use 2 female FBI executives as shooting targets. That was testimony of Jennifer Moore, HR under Human Resources under oath from the FBI. Mr. Serapin describes himself as a congressional whistleblower, but committee Republicans will not tell us whether he has been in contact with them. Are you familiar with former...
Yeah, okay, so let's just go right there. Garrett was suspended for leaking information to the media. That's false. I've already told you guys I did that. I went to Project Veritas and spoke with them. I was the person in the interview. So screw them. That's wrong. Marcus has been vindicated and given his clearance back. Garrett should as well. The claims about the female targeting thing and mishandling a weapon, all false, all garbage, all made up. There's video of it. You can find it. It's on the Rumble channel. Search Sonoma Ranch underneath our channel. You can find it on Rumble. You can find it on Twitter. Actually, you can find it on YouTube if you want. You can watch the 5-minute interaction that I had that got me suspended from the FBI forever. And the guy walked off and said 10-8, no report. 10-8 means I'm going back into service. No report, self-explanatory. There was no written interaction of the conversation I had with a police officer, who was, by the way, out of his jurisdiction and in mine, because we were on federal lands in the county. And I knew the law and he didn't, if you believe him, which I don't. And I don't know about the whole targeting things. They've said this a couple times about me saying I would use people as targets. That does sound like something I might say. Using someone's picture as a target, that sounds funny to me. But I didn't know Jennifer Moore was a problem until after I was suspended. So all of that stuff is post-FBI time when I was no longer an FBI agent. So screw them. As a private citizen, I have all kinds of spicy opinions. And I kept them to myself the entire time I worked for the federal government, which is why you get stuff like this. Here's Jerry Connolly now from yesterday's hearing talking about threats. Now, you guys know, if you watch this program, if you watch the American Radicals program, there's a very specific legal definition of the word threats. That doesn't seem to matter to walrus mustache sporting fat guy, Jerry Connolly, who was my congressman, by the way, who I've been like 5 feet away from while carrying multiple weapons because I was an FBI agent and I went to his stupid town halls talking about how much he hated guns. He's ignorant, he's dangerous, he's stupid, and he should be, as Dan Goldman says, eliminated from politics. Because people like that have no business being it. They don't understand what the oath is. And if you listen to this exchange back and forth with Glenn Kirchner, who goes on to say that he got some witnesses killed, which, by the way, is the most crazy thing I heard in the entire hearing. What's really amazing is Jerry Connolly suggests that I should be investigated by a weaponization committee as a private citizen for freaking tweets, for social media posts. How about someone that doesn't understand what their damn oath is? He's talking to a witness who literally said you should be not following unlawful orders. If somebody is told to investigate me over my speech, those are unlawful orders, lest you have any concern about that, DOJ people that listen to our podcast. I'm finding out more and more that these people do listen to the podcast, and we might be the most mentioned podcast in the 118th Congress, as far as I can tell. We're all over the place in the congressional record. They don't want me in front of it, though, because I will hurt some freaking feelings. Here's Jerry Connolly being a fat piece of garbage, and he's so smug. He really is. He's really an atrocious person. And like I said, I've been to his town halls. He doesn't know, but I was his constituent. I didn't vote for him.
Your testimony. I don't think we should ever do that in a committee. We don't have to agree.
Thank you, Representative Connolly. I'm from New Jersey, so I've suffered worse.
I'm from Boston originally. We don't like that. Mr. Kirchner, Mr. Levitt's client, Garrett O'Brien, posted the names and personally identifying information, including parts of home addresses, for 4 current or former FBI officials. In August, Kyle Serafin, who has hosted multiple podcasts with Mr. O'Boyle, tweeted, and I quote, "The people who left Garrett O'Boyle's family and my family homeless should experience what guys like us are prepared to do to evil," unquote. Mr. Kirchner, you served in the FBI. What's wrong with identifying FBI officials' partial addresses, home towns, personal information, and making a threat? You may justify it because you think they're engaged in evil, but that's a direct threat from the way I read it. What could go wrong with that kind of thing? And isn't that the kind of threat of violence that I think, ought to be examined by a weaponization committee as opposed to what we're doing here today? Your view.
Yes, sir. Thank you. So I wasn't with the FBI, though. I was with the Department of Justice, the U.S. Attorney's Office, right up the street there. But I'll tell you, I worked closely with the FBI, the Washington Field Office, directly across the street from my former office. And, we moved heaven and earth to prevent personal information from getting out about our witnesses, about people we were investigating, so as they, to prevent them from being unfairly, perhaps, smeared with an investigation that didn't result in an indictment. And, I had my fair share of witnesses killed in Washington, D.C., because their information got out. They were labeled as snitches. And then I had to sit with the families of a witness and talk about, how very sorry I was for what happened to them because that information.
So while we're bemoaning the alleged mistreatment of certain individuals, including some here today, which may not be true, we're escalating it with actual threats that could lead to violence.
He doesn't know what an actual threat is. And Jerry Conley, when you die, you will face an answer for these things. Because you're using your authorities for evil. And you're an evil person. You say evil things. You use your platform for lies. And I'm telling you, I don't care what happens to you. Now, you just heard a guy who was a 30-year prosecutor working in the District of Columbia. And he just said that they moved heaven and earth to safeguard information of former DOJ and DOJ officials and FBI officials. And then he also got witnesses whacked because someone let the information leak. Can we have a little investigation into that? That would be very interesting. That's a hearing I would sit down. Or did he just lie under oath? Did he just perjure himself and he never had a witness whacked? I want to know. And for a guy who talks about moving heaven and earth to be able to protect witnesses and DOJ officials and people from the FBI, it took me 3 minutes to find his address. You're looking at his house right there. That's what it looks like. It's beautiful, by the way. He paid $1.35 million for it in 2022. He's left DOJ in 2018. So in 4 years, he was able to buy a very nice house in Leesburg, Virginia, which is a beautiful place. I have an uncle that lives out there. It is not doxing someone to talk about what city they lived in. And what Garrett was putting out in the world was that Dana Perkins was a registered Democrat. That may or may not be the case. I have not evaluated his background research on that, but he posted it and I responded. He mentioned that Jeffrey Veltri was now an independent, but previously a Democrat. It took me 3 minutes to find this, people. It turns out that if you know how to do things, and I don't have any special tools and I don't pay access to any of the actual databases that you can pay and belong to, that's his home. It's almost 6,000 square feet, 5-bedroom, 5-bath. Very nice. Looked inside of it. It's all on Zillow, by the way. All of the pictures, which I'm showing you, a beautiful bedroom and a very, very nice kitchen. It sits on a golf course. I'm not sure what hole it is. I didn't really dig that much into it. It's a nice house. It's in Beacon Hill. That's the area of Leesburg. So Glenn, don't say that you moved heaven and earth to protect people when you're so stupid as to give $5,000 in your own name, not to a PAC. You gave $5,000 directly to Biden for president, and they listed your name on the FEC website. By the way, you guys can look him up. He's the only Glenn Kirshner in Virginia. Obviously, you know what city he lives in, but it doesn't matter. He's literally the only one. And he gave money to the Harris campaign. It started off as the Biden campaign. So there you go. This is nonsense. These are people that just are making it up as they go. They say things that are untrue. They say things that are probably lies. I don't think that he actually had that actually happen. I don't think he got witnesses whacked, but it's an interesting take. So what did Marcus Allen think about all this kind of stuff? Well, he issued a warning to America, to you, and to me. I've already been heeding it, but I hope you do too. That's why we have the sponsors we have. You'll notice we have food preservation things like Patriot Coolers, which I'll do one real quick right here because our friends at Patriot Coolers are part of it. You guys can support them. They're in it the same way we are. They make a good product. They're a thing that keeps things cold and hot. You might need that in an emergency. I'm just saying. A way to move water around or to keep food cold or warm. PatriotCoolers.com is the website. That's where you go. Promo code KYLE. Why do we choose them? Because I use those on duty when I used to do the job, sitting in a car for hours and hours, watching scumbags, watching people who were not good. I did public corruption cases. We'd watch like former cops or current cops or people who worked in jails. And I carried this actual Patriot Cooler. This is the one I used. It didn't have the same sticker on it. But this is the Gen 1. I got this in October of 2017 when I was an FBI employee. And I used to carry it into the office. You guys can get your own, patriotcoolers.com. Again, we'll have a new one soon to show you. The major, the 40 ounce. I probably would have used that. I used to drink like liters of coffee on surveillance. Promo code KYLE saves you 10%. You'll notice the other sponsors we have or affiliates. People like this, Shield Arms. I'm not really trying to read the promos. I'm just telling you why I choose the people we've chosen. Because I turn away people who want to sell male vitality or gold that you can't use because they're going to scam you. Shield Arms is one of them. They're a company. I carry their magazines every single day in my Glock 43X. That's the pistol I have. If you use my promo code, you save 5% on their stuff. That's not nothing. I've literally used the promo code to go buy a new barrel. I have a new barrel. I can't pull it on here because I'll turn us off YouTube, but I have it on my other 43X. It's a threaded barrel with a little suppressor on it. I have a micro pistol this big that's suppressed, and I can shoot jacketed hollow points out of it that are subsonic. Again, promo code KYLE saves you 5% at Shield Arms. Why do we have these sponsors? Why have we chosen these people? Why do we have a food storage company? Why do we have these things stacked up in my garage? By the way, some of those little ammo containers you see there have as many as 4,000 rounds in them. So you're seeing a stack of ammo and food. Why do I do that? Why do I think that's important? Because I inherently understand what Marcus Allen sees as well, and so do you. Here's the warning he had. This was one of his sort of final statements. They didn't give him a lot of time to talk because they weren't interested in the witnesses who obviously brought irrefutable proof that he was correct, that Sheila Jackson Lee was a liar, that Jerry Connolly was a liar, that Stacey Plaskett was a liar, that these liars get up there and talk about Project 2025 when the hearing is theoretically about FBI whistleblowers, because these people do not care about truth or honesty. And there's a narrow market for it right now. Even people on the right are interested in doing something else. Here's Marcus's warning. Listen.
This is a warning to the American people. I say, I personally have no confidence that the FBI will rein in its own conduct. I've been persecuted along with Garrett, Steve and Kyle, and countless other whistleblowers. It is my opinion that the Bureau used reprisal and fear to control the workforce. It has been a seemingly effective tactic. I personally believe that there are no current effective checks and balances against them conducting lawless action with any type of correction in a legitimate time frame. I welcome the work of the IG, but I think any type of lawless action, there's no legitimate time frame to rein them back in. Their ability to overclassify information can allow them to stonewall forever. To the American people, you have a duty as a citizen to vote, and I strongly urge you to do so. It's how you participate in the American experience. I know people have doubts about election integrity, but you must vote. It is your claim. Stake your claim and don't forfeit it willingly. Have your voice heard. My other recommendations are in the natural order. First, vote. The second is the Second Amendment. Arm yourself and know how to defend yourself. Make 3 to 4 friends in your neighborhood and promise to come to each other's mutual aid in times of hardship. And during the Great Depression, people stocked up a pantry. So I think that's a good practice, especially in our economic times, and make sure you have 3 to 4 months of food. And as a person of faith, I'd say pray the rosary, go to the First Friday devotions. That's for everybody, all my brothers and sisters of all faiths, and I know I'm Catholic, and read the gospel of our Lord and Savior, Jesus Christ, and live it every day.
That's what Marcus had to say. You get it? Food, water, be able to protect yourself, defend yourself, be able to handle the natural order, make sure you vote, and tuck in for hard times. 90 days, 120 days worth. I brought up the fact that I use these things, why we have the sponsors we have. You guys were going goofy in the chat over there talking about pee bottles, because that's the other thing I said you need on surveillance, and I say it many times, and I've shown it to senior executives. You asked about pee bottles. Yeah, I keep one right here. I got one right here under my desk. I've always got one. You keep water in there. You actually put the water in there first, because you don't want it to just be nothing but urine. Yeah, I used to carry those on work. I still have the same tools. I still have a gun next to me. I still have the coffee cup, and I still got the pee bottle. And I've actually got a microphone, which is very similar to being on a radio. This job is not that different from surveillance in some ways. I hope that amuses you. The reason why you need to tuck in is because some of the things that are coming at you are really nuts. They really are. We're going to end up chopping this out of the audio part, so I'm going to have to remember to do that as I post this. For those of you who are audio listening, if you want to see this video, you can see it on Twitter at Based Mike Lee. That's Senator Mike Lee's Twitter feed. It's a video that was put out by Iran, but it was put out in 2022 about Donald Trump. And this is pretty unsettling stuff. Like it's a fantasy version of them being able to kill him with a drone at his golf course. However, this is not new. Iran has wanted to kill Donald Trump for a very long time. Iran has been at war with the United States, basically in an undeclared way since 1979. They declared it. We just haven't declared it. Okay? 1979. This has been, since before I was born, a thing. And they would love to kill any American leaders and any American military. And they do so. That's the reason why Soleimani had to die. That's the reason why going after Hezbollah is fine with those of us who know what's up. Let it happen. Let Israel off the chain. I don't care. They can take out all of these people. There's a reason why those people are oppressed and that they are not the way that they were in the 60s. In the 60s, they were a very different nation. So Iran has been at war. But when you see things like Mark Levin out there screaming on Twitter and on True Socials and pushing out these narratives that we are now, Iran has declared war on America. They want to kill Donald Trump. They've wanted to kill Donald Trump for a long time. They want to kill all American officials, generals, people that are involved in the military complex. They want that. Soldiers, airmen, Marine, sailors. They want this done. It's a fact. So this is nothing new. Just be cautious at people that are trying to turn your hearts, that are trying to get you riled up about something that is not reasonable. This video is worth knowing about, though, because as that narrative marches out, you should know there's nothing new here. It's still a concern, but it's not a novel concern. It's the same concerns that you should always have. You look around and you prioritize threats in the bullseye. What is a threat to me? What's to my family? What's to my community? What's to my neighbors? And so on. Notice how Marcus said, go out and make 10 friends in your neighborhood. You should do that. You notice that we recommend it here on the program. You should pray. You should gather things. You should prepare. You should train. And you should create a community that is ready to do mutual aid. This is what American Contingency was about, by the way. And the FBI called that a militia group with a low history of violence. That's Mike Glover's outfit. American Contingency was literally Americans getting together because they knew the federal government wasn't going to solve it, and it won't. So we talk about that a lot. All right, here's the video from Mike Lee. This is the kind of stuff that would be a black swan type event that you would want your neighbors to be sane, sober, capable, and trained on. Yeah, I played all that propaganda. Its capabilities Iran doesn't have. But it's a thing that we should know. Again, it was posted apparently to the Ayatollah's website. If you didn't see the text that was written out there, it said to the one who murdered Soleimani, this is going to be, revenge is dedication or something to that effect, or dedication is revenge. Yeah, it's a fantasy. It's an Iranian fantasy to get them really excited. And they've wanted it for a long time. It's nothing new. Shouldn't surprise you. I guess we're going to end with this. And I was going to show you this too. This is the plate carrier I just picked up. My wife was like, wait, do we need to get new plate carriers? And the answer is, yeah, of course we do. You heard what Marcus said. Prepare yourself. We'll talk about stuff like that, like kit. We'll talk about things like ammo and storage and all those kind of things over on locals.com. So you guys can join us at Kyle Seraphin over there if you want. It's kyleseraphin.com. I just wanted to show you the plate carrier. And you'll also notice that there is a pretty cool looking Suspendables PVC patch, which I got from my buddy Garrett O'Boyle. If you guys want to support my friend, the other FBI whistleblowers who are not invited to be in part of that hearing, it's the-suspendables.com. Again, the-suspendables.com. Use promo code Kyle to save 10%. I get nothing out of this money-wise. It's simply supporting my buddy. I know he's got some of those patches. They look awesome on a plate carrier. I have them on several. And yeah, I have multiple plate carriers because that's what you do. I actually have enough for a freaking platoon when it comes to having guns and ammo because I think I might have to arm my neighbors. That's just the world we're living in right now. If you guys want to get stuff and mark so you know the friendlies, you can do it as an IFF, identify friend foe. You can get Suspendables patches for your stuff at the-suspendables.com. They ship really quick. It's really easy. Simple thing for him. Let me do one last story because I do have another story that I thought was kind of wild. And I don't know if I even grabbed a slide for it. So let me just see real quick here if I have it. No, I don't have a slide for it. So we'll just stay here. I grabbed this at the end of my prep this morning, and it's from CNN. You guys know I always go to CNN. We started off. This was one of the first stories they had. The Rust Belt manufacturing collapse has devastated their communities. 2 men explain who they're supporting for president. So this was interesting to me because CNN is trying to paint a picture of who is who in the world. The community they're talking about is Saginaw, Michigan. And they interviewed two people, a guy named Hurley Coleman III. He's a black man that's associated with a church there, and he works in some sort of nonprofit situation. And then there's another guy, and his name is Phil Kerner, and he's a die and tool shop, a retired tool maker and machinist. And his kids do the same thing. So kind of a generational, working class guy with this very sort of American set of tool skills, right? So we're talking about these two guys, and you'll be shocked to learn that the black guy who's involved in a nonprofit and a church, he is going to support Kamala Harris. And the reason he says is because the federal government provides a lifeline to the nonprofit business that he does. So, of course, it's in his best interest to support a bigger federal government. He said sometimes people come in and we're their last hope and the lights have been shut off and they have no food in their cabinet. Senior citizens have been sitting at home, nobody to call, no one to help them. And so our nonprofit is able to help them out. And he thinks that the federal government is the answer to that. That is misplaced, that feminine worldview that you heard at the beginning about COVID. If you think the federal government creates or gives anything, no, it redistributes it at a poor level. Imagine if the neighbors just stepped up like we did for a suspendable that we, if you guys are on our local channel, you know a little bit about. We help each other because we can. The federal government is a expensive route to do it. It's a very circuitous route to send money to DC, send it through the IRS, then send it through all the different agencies that have to pay all these stupid people, and then come back in and give it to your community at a much lower rate. It's like Social Security. It's a terrible way to do it. And as one of you just said in the chat, yeah, bribery. That's what it looks like. It looks like bribery. You're buying votes by promising things to people that don't earn them. It's not theirs. And then the other guy is actually someone who worked with his hands, a tradesman, a skilled craftsman, and he thinks that Donald Trump is better, predictably. They've set it up as a black versus white. They've set it up as a, people who are altruistic and compassionate and the opposite. What this really comes down to, and I think this is the most important piece, is that it should come down to people who understand the nature of the world and know that they're being lied to by our government and that is an inefficient system, the worst solution to all the problems, including when it's the only solution, and people who think that the government actually grants you things and that they're willing to give it the power of God. It's a fundamentally spiritual battle. It's a faith-based battle. That's why this is so pervasive. That's why guys like Marcus Allen do belong in that chair. It'd be nice if there were some people that could fight on the worldly front as well, because I assure you, I would have been there hurting some feelings. And I'm not swearing in under oath with congressmen unless they do the same. Remember the bullseye. Focus on the things that you can control within your sphere. Do not get outside of your skis and have that feminine worldview where you're willing to give all the things you have at the detriment of yourself and the people in your circle. Because that's what the left has been doing. They continue to do that. All right? I'm going to solve an age-old problem that doesn't exist in my household, but I understand that it exists in many marriages. That's our palate cleanse for the day. The question is, leaving the toilet seat up, the problem that apparently women have with men. My wife actually does not have such a problem. I've never had that conversation with her, I don't think. But apparently a lot of people do. So we're going to solve that with logic, with a masculine worldview. It's going to help you guys. Any of you that are in that scenario, any of you women that need a little bit of logic in your life, you will also appreciate this. It's not one side or the other. Before we do, let's throw a 5-star review up. They're still coming in on Apple. We're over 1,000, but we've been kind of slow because I'm pretty sure we're censored there like we are on Facebook. This is from Fesnick. It says, meme craziness by God, 5 stars. I enjoy listening to your shows. I listen daily, and every time I see a funny video on iFunny, it is covered the next day or later on your show. God truly knows us and put us together for those who we can relate to. Hope you and the Suspendables keep up the good work. Skies out, thighs out. A little reference to wearing the Ranger panties, which you can, of course, get at our merch store, too. Garrett makes those, and I wear them when I run. And you should, too. There's nothing more freeing than 2 layers of mesh between you and the universe. Do the math on that. Let's solve that age-old problem. Seat up, seat down. Who should do what? I think this guy's got some real solid points. So stand by to have your mind blown.
If I put the seat up to urinate and then put it down after I'm done, at your request, that is 2 seat repetitions per urinary event. This arrangement means that if you go into the bathroom, you can just sit down and urinate and leave with 0 seat repetitions per urinary event. Would it not then be a fair and equitable marriage arrangement, creating a scenario where we are both responsible for only 1 seat repetition per urinary event? And she's gone.
I think that actually sums up how politics works in America. You come up with a logical idea, you tell them this is the thing, and the left gets up and leaves like that woman did. but she only left because she knew he was right. I don't really care about what you do with this toilet seat, folks, but I do think that that has a sort of a broader implication of the sort of the discourse that we're having in this country at this point. Don't let them leave the table. Don't go to bed angry. Okay. Well, lighten up. Hope you guys enjoyed that. We're going to do a call-in show tonight with Sal Greco. So if you guys were waiting for that, again, it's at Locals. It's KyleSerafin.com. If you guys want to sign up to get the phone number, the only way you're going to get the phone number is being a subscriber either on X, Twitter, or you could be a subscriber at Locals and you will have access to our phone call-in. We might even have some former NYPD guys that have been calling the Eric Adam demise for quite a while. KyleSerafin.com to go to the Locals channel to get the number. And then tune in tonight. It's at 8 Eastern time. That makes it 7 Central time. My time, we'll be talking to Sal Greco, who was on the show the other day. And you guys can ask him questions. We'll have some fun New York stuff. We'll talk about pizza and things like that. So enjoy that if you want to. Otherwise, we'll see you again tomorrow morning with Steve Friend for the real Steve Friend Hour, the Friendly Friday that we do. And I'll see some of you on Saturday if you're out in Tennessee near Knoxville. The information is on my social media. Thanks so much for following us today. God bless all of you. God bless this country. God bless Marcus Allen. Keep him safe as he travels. And we'll see you guys again soon. We'll see you either tonight or tomorrow.
Thanks for listening to The Kyle Seraphin Show, streamed live weekdays on rumble.com/Kyle Seraphin. Follow Kyle on Twitter, Truth Social, and Instagram at Kyle Seraphin.